Ethan Carter put his boot through a locked steel door and dragged the most powerful woman in Chicago out by her wrist. 4 seconds before the panel behind her blew a sheet of white fire across the room she'd been standing in. She screamed at him, called him insubordinate, threatened his job. 2 hours later, in an empty office at 2 a.m., Victoria Hayes fell asleep on his shoulder like a woman who had been holding her breath for 32 years. Then her phone lit up. An unsent message glowing in the dark. "I wish he saw me the way I see him." Ethan read the name it was addressed to, and it wasn't his. Stay with me to the end of this one, folks. And do me a favor, drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Hit subscribe if you believe the quietest man in the room is usually the one holding it up. The call came in at 9:52 on a Thursday night, and Ethan Carter was standing at his kitchen counter with a peanut butter knife in his hand. He had exactly one job left that day, and it was the sandwich. Crusts off. Strawberry jam, not grape, because grape was the wrong kind of purple. Cut on the diagonal, because Lily Carter, age 8, had decided in September that triangles tasted better than rectangles. And Ethan had learned a long time ago that you don't argue with a kid about the things that cost you nothing. His phone buzzed against the counter and rattled the knife off the plate. "Carter," he said. "Boss." It was Ray Delacroix, 31 years on the building, hands like tree bark. Ray didn't call after 9. Ray didn't call at all if he could help it. "Chiller 3's gone." Ethan set the knife down. "Gone how?" "Gone like it made a noise I ain't heard a machine make since Desert Storm, and now it's quiet, and quiet's worse." "What's 4 doing?" "4's carrying the whole load by itself. 4 is not happy about it. 4 is telling me all about it." Ethan closed his eyes. Behind him from the living room came the sound of a cartoon and a small voice singing along half a beat behind the words. "Server floor. 91 degrees and climbing about a degree every 8 minutes." Ethan did the math without meaning to. He'd been doing that math in his head for 8 months, ever since the first time he'd written it down on a requisition form and watched it disappear into an office upstairs. "Call it in to the desk," he said. "I'm 40 minutes out." "Boss?" Ray's voice dropped. "They already called it in. Upstairs is here. All of them." Ethan opened his eyes. "All of them." "Suits in the lobby, boss. Hale's here. And—" Ray paused. "She's coming." Ethan went into the living room and crouched down so he was eye level with his daughter, the way his own father never once had. "Lil." "No. You don't know what I'm gonna say. You're gonna say Mrs. Kowalski." Lily didn't look away from this TV. "You have your work face. I have a work face. You get a line right here." She reached out without looking and pressed her thumb between his eyebrows hard, like she was trying to iron it flat. "Right there. That's the line." Ethan caught her hand and held onto it a second longer than he needed to. "Something broke at the building," he said. "Something big. If I don't go, it's gonna cost some people their jobs." "Which people?" "Ray. Marcus in the shop. Tommy." Lily thought about that with the terrible seriousness of a child who has already learned what it costs when a grown-up doesn't come home. "Tommy gave me a candy cane at Christmas," she said finally. "He did." "Okay." She let go of his hand. "But you have to do the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you say it back." Ethan swallowed. 4 years, and it still caught him crossways in the chest every single time. "You're the best part of my whole entire day," he said. "You're the best part of my whole entire day," she said. "Now go fix it." The lobby of Hayes Technologies had cost, according to a magazine article Ray had taped to the shop wall as a joke, somewhere north of $2 million. Ethan had personally replaced the ballast in 19 of its lights, recaulked the whole east window wall on a Sunday, and once at 3 in the morning mopped up a burst supply line on his hands and knees while a security guard held a flashlight. Nobody in that lobby at 10:40 that night had ever seen him do any of it. There were 11 of them, all in suits, all standing in a rough half-circle near the elevators, like men waiting for a verdict. At the center of it stood Marcus Hale, Chief Operating Officer Silver at the temples, The kind of man who shakes your hand and looks past your shoulder while he does it. Ethan came through the service corridor in a canvas jacket with his father's name still stitched over the pocket, and Hale glanced up. "There he is," Hale said. "The guy with the wrench. Mr. Hale." "How bad?" "Haven't seen it yet." "You built it, didn't you?" "No, sir. It was here in '09. I've been keeping it alive since 19. "Well, you're not keeping it very alive, are you?" One of the junior men laughed. It was the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. It's a man checking which way the wind is blowing and leaning that direction. Ethan had heard it his whole life. From foremen. From loan officers. From the guy at the dealership who asked if he'd like to look at something more in his range. He'd stopped hearing it years ago, mostly. "Sir, with respect, I need to get downstairs." "Wait here," Hale said. "The CEO's on her way. She'll want to hear it from you directly." He turned to the man beside him and said not quietly at all, "Have the maintenance guy wait by the elevator. And somebody get him a badge that works, for God's sake." Ethan waited by the elevator. I was still waiting when the doors on the far side opened and Victoria Hayes walked in. She was 32 years old, and she had built the company in this building out of nothing but a rented server, a maxed-out credit card, and a stubbornness that had frightened 3 separate venture firms into giving her money just to make her stop calling. She was also a big woman. Not that anybody said it out loud, they said other things instead. Formidable. Imposing. A presence. Ethan had read the profile in the Tribune 2 years back, and noticed that the reporter had spent 4 paragraphs on her business and 9 on her clothes, and had thought at the time, that's a hell of a thing to do to a person. She came across that lobby in a black coat, with the collar still up from the cold, and she did not stop moving. "Where's the failure?" "Sublevel 2 chiller plant," Hale started. "I'm asking him." She didn't even look at Hale. She looked at Ethan. "You're Carter." Ethan blinked. "Yes, ma'am." "You signed the last 4 inspection reports. Where's the failure?" "Compressor on Unit 3 seized. Which means Unit 4 is doing the work of 2 units, and Unit 4 has a bearing that's been screaming since March." "How long does 4 have?" "If I get on it now, maybe 6 hours. "And if you don't?" "Then in about 90 minutes, this building starts cooking $200 million worth of hardware, and about 400 customers wake up tomorrow with nothing." The lobby got very quiet. Victoria Hayes looked at him for a long 3 seconds. "Elevator," she said. "You and me." "Victoria," Hale said. "You don't need to go down there. We can have him report." "Marcus." She was already walking. "If my building is on fire, I'd like to see the fire." In the elevator, she pulled a hair tie off her wrist and put her hair up without looking in the mirrored wall, which Ethan noticed because people always looked in the mirrored wall. "Say the thing about March again," she said. "Ma'am." "You said the bearing's been screaming since March. It's November." "Yes, ma'am." "So somebody knew." Ethan chose his words the way he chose a wrench the right size, no bigger. "I filed a capital request in March," he said. "And in April. And May. How many total? 11. She turned her head and looked at him fully for the first time. 11 requests, she said. In 8 months. "Yes, ma'am." "Who denied them?" The elevator dinged for sublevel 2, and Ethan stepped out first without answering, because there are things a man in a canvas jacket does not say out loud about a man in a $4,000 suit, not in a building where the suit signs the paychecks. But she'd heard the answer anyway. He could tell by the way she stopped in the doorway. The chiller plant was 104 degrees and sounded like a freight train dying. Ray Delacroix was already up on the catwalk with his shirt soaked through, and when he saw who Ethan had brought with him, he nearly dropped a socket wrench off the rail. "Ms. Hayes." "Keep working." She had to shout over it. "Carter, what do you need?" "I need to bypass 3 entirely so 4 stops trying to feed it. I need to pull the load off the east racks so 4's got a prayer of holding. And I need somebody with authority to tell 400 customers they're getting degraded service for 6 hours, because if we don't shed load, we lose all of it." "Done." Ethan stopped. "Ma'am." "I said done. Shed the load. I'll make the calls. There's a protocol it goes through the... Carter. She was already pulling her phone out. I own the protocol. Shed the load. Ray from the catwalk said something under his breath that Ethan chose not to hear. They worked. That was the part that surprised him, and he thought about it later. Over and over she stayed. She didn't stay in a chair by the door with her phone. She stayed on her feet in a 104-degree room in a $500 blouse, and she asked questions that were actually questions. What's that gauge? Suction pressure. What's it supposed to be? 68. It says 41. Yes, ma'am. Is 41 bad? 41 is why we're all here. At 11:30. She took her coat off and threw it over a railing where it immediately got a black grease stripe across it, and she never once looked at it again. At 11:52, she held a flashlight steady over Ray's shoulder for 11 straight minutes while he pulled a coupling, and when Ray thanked her, she said, "You're the one with your arm in the machine." And Ray looked at Ethan like he'd seen a ghost. At 12:20, she asked Ethan a question that stopped him cold. "Do you eat, ma'am? You've been in this room 3 hours. Have you eaten anything since you got here?" "No, ma'am." "Have you eaten anything today?" Ethan thought about it honestly, which was his mistake. "I had some crust," he said. "Some what?" "Crust. Off a sandwich. I cut the crusts off for my daughter, and then I eat them. It's not a whole thing, it's just..." And Victoria Hayes, CEO 32, worth an amount of money that had its own zip code, stood in a boiler room at midnight and laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It came out of her sideways, surprised, like it had escaped before she could get a hand on it. And she put her fingers over her mouth immediately, the way people do when they've been taught their laugh is too loud or too much or takes up too much room. Ethan noticed that too. He noticed it, and he filed it away without knowing why. At 1:15 in the morning, they lost the East Electrical Room. There was no warning. There was a sound like a wet cough behind a steel door, and then the lights in the corridor went brown, and Victoria Hayes, who had gone in there 90 seconds earlier to find a working outlet for her phone, was on the wrong side of it. Ethan was moving before Ray finished shouting. The door had latched. He hit it once with his shoulder, and it didn't move, and he could smell it now. The smell every man who's worked a building knows and never forgets. Hot varnish and ozone, the smell of copper starting to make up its mind. Carter. He put his boot through the strike plate. The door came off its top hinge and swung, and he saw her standing 4 feet from a gray steel panel that was making a sound like bacon, and she was looking at it the way people look at things they don't have a word for yet. Ethan grabbed her by the wrist and pulled. He pulled hard enough that she came off her feet. Hard enough that she hit the corridor wall on the other side, and he came down half on top of her. One arm braced over her head, and behind them, the panel let go with a bang that Ray said later he felt in his teeth on the far end of the building. White light. Then nothing but the sound of the two of them breathing. Ethan pushed himself up onto his knees. Ma'am, look at me. Are you..." She hit him, open hand flat against his chest, shoving him back. "You put your hands on me." "Yes, ma'am." "You grabbed me." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you understand what that..." Her voice cracked in the middle of it, and she stopped, and Ethan watched her hear herself. Watched her realize her hands were shaking. Watched something behind her eyes go from fury to something a lot worse and a lot more naked. She was still holding her phone. The screen was cracked all the way across. "You could have said something," she said, quieter. "You could have called out. You could have said, 'Victoria, get out.'" "There wasn't 4 seconds for a whole sentence, ma'am." "Then you say my name." "I did," Ethan said. "You didn't hear it." She looked at him for a long moment, sitting on the floor of a service corridor in a ruined blouse with her hair coming down. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay." She put her hand out. "Help me up." Ethan pulled her to her feet. She was heavier than she looked, and she braced for it. He saw her brace for it, saw her jaw set, the way a person does when they've spent their whole life waiting for somebody's face to change. His face didn't change. He just pulled, and she came up, and he let go and stepped back and said, "Watch the glass." And Victoria Hayes stood there in the brown emergency light, and looked at him like he had done something extraordinary. At 2:04 a.m., the plant stabilized. Ray got Unit 4's load down to 60%, and it stopped screaming and started merely complaining, and Ethan came up out of the sublevel with his shirt stuck to his back and found the CEO of the company sitting on the floor of the 22nd floor lobby with her back against the wall because the power on that floor was still out and the chairs were all the other direction. She had 2 vending machine sandwiches in her lap. "Sit down," she said. "Ma'am, I should Carter." She held one up. "Sit down and eat the terrible sandwich." He sat down. 4 feet away. She slid it across the floor to him. They ate in silence for a minute. It was objectively a terrible sandwich. "Turkey," she said. "Allegedly. There's a word on the wrapper that says turkey. That's as far as anybody's willing to commit." Ethan laughed a real one short and surprised, and she looked over at him fast, like she'd caught something. "What?" he said. "Nothing." She looked back at her sandwich. "You don't laugh at work." "Neither do you." "No," she said. "I don't." It came out slow after that, the way things do at 2 in the morning, when everyone's too tired to hold the shape they usually hold. She asked about his daughter. He said Lily was 8, and going through a phase where triangles tasted better than rectangles, and Victoria said without missing a beat, "She's right though." And Ethan laughed again. She asked where Lily's mother was, and the air changed. 4 years ago, Ethan said. March. She had a headache on a Tuesday, and by Friday we knew what it was, and by June, she was gone. "I'm sorry." "Everybody is." "That's not—" Victoria stopped, started again. "That's not what I meant. I meant, I'm sorry that you have to keep saying it, out loud, to people who ask." Ethan sat with that a second. "Yeah," he said. "That's the part nobody gets. My mother died 3 years ago," she said. "February. And for about a year, every single time somebody said, 'I'm sorry for your loss,' I had to be gracious about it. I had to comfort them. Do you know how tiring that is? Being the one who has to make everybody else feel better about the worst thing that ever happened to you." "Yes, ma'am." "Stop calling me ma'am." "I don't know what else to call you." "Try Victoria, once, just to see if the building falls down." Ethan looked at the ceiling like he was checking. "Victoria," he said. "There," she said. Still standing. At 2:40, she started talking about the 11 requisitions. "Why didn't you come to me? You're the CEO." "That's an answer to a different question." "Ma'am Victoria, there are 9 floors between my shop and your office. Every one of those floors has somebody on it whose job is making sure I don't get to you." "Marcus." Ethan didn't say anything. "Say it." "I'd like to keep my job." "Say it anyway." "Mr. Hale denied 9 of the 11, Ethan said. The other 2 never got a signature at all, and in June he came down to the shop and told me, and I'm quoting him, that if I filed one more request about a machine that was still running, he'd find somebody who understood the difference between broken and inconvenient." Victoria Hayes put her sandwich down. "He said that to you?" "Yes." "And you kept filing?" "I filed 2 more after that." Ethan shrugged. "August and October." "Why?" And this was the thing. Ethan Carter said that he did not know at the time was going to change the rest of his life. "Because it was going to fail," he said. "And when it failed, somebody was going to have to be able to prove that it wasn't nobody's fault. It was somebody's." She stared at him. "You built a paper trail," she said, "for 8 months, knowing they'd blame you anyway." "I've got a kid," Ethan said. "I don't get to lose this job because somebody upstairs needed a name." Somewhere around 2:55. She stopped answering him. Ethan said something about the replacement lead time on a compressor, and there was no response, and he turned his head. Victoria Hayes was asleep. Not politely asleep. Not resting her eyes asleep. She had gone all the way down, chin-tipped, one hand still open in her lap, and as he watched, her head slid sideways off the wall and came to rest against his shoulder. Ethan Carter went completely rigid. His first thought was that he should wake her. His second thought was that she had been on her feet for 19 hours in a 100-degree room in a building she built, and that in 19 hours he had not seen one single person ask her if she was okay. Not one. 11 men in a lobby, and every one of them had asked her a question that started with, "What do we do about?" Nobody had asked, "Are you all right?" So he didn't move. He sat on the floor of his own dark building with the most powerful woman in Chicago, asleep on his shoulder, and he stared straight ahead at nothing, and he thought about how a person gets to be 32 years old, and that tired. At 3:11, her phone lit up. It was face up on the floor between them, cracked corner to corner, and the screen came alive with the low blue glow that fills a dark room whether you want it to or not. Ethan looked at it. He couldn't not look at it. It was 8 inches from his knee. It wasn't a call. It wasn't an alert. It was a message thread, open unsent, a draft sitting in the box with the cursor still blinking at the end of it, like it had been typed and retyped and never let go of. "I wish he saw me the way I see him." Ethan stopped breathing. He read it again, and again, and a fourth time because his brain kept insisting there had to be a word in there he'd gotten wrong. "I wish he saw me the way I see him." Something moved in his chest that he had not let move in 4 years. Something enormous and stupid and hopeful. And for about 1.5 seconds, Ethan Carter, 35, widower, maintenance supervisor, a man who had not been chosen by anybody since June of a year he tried not to think about, allowed himself to wonder. Then his eyes went up 2 inches to the top of the thread, to the name, M.H. The screen dimmed, then went black. Ethan sat perfectly still in the dark, with her breathing soft and slow against his shoulder, and he thought about a man in a $4,000 suit standing in a lobby saying, "Have the maintenance guy wait by the elevator. Marcus Hale." He didn't move for the next 2 hours. He didn't shift his arm or check the time or let his shoulder drop even when it went numb and then past numb because she was sleeping and she needed it. And there wasn't a single thing in this world he could give her that she couldn't buy except this. At 5:20, she woke up. She came up fast the way people do when they realize where they are. Her hand went to her hair, then to her collar. Then she was on her feet and 3 steps away, and her voice came out flat and clipped and 11 floors higher than it had been all night. "What time is it?" 20 past 5. "The plant?" "Stable, 60%. Ray's still on it." "Good." She picked up her coat with the grease stripe on it. She picked up her cracked phone. She did not look at him. "Carter." "Ma'am?" She stopped at that, just for a second. Something went across her face and was gone. "That didn't happen," she said. Ethan got up off the floor. His right arm hung useless and full of pins at his side, and he didn't rub it because he didn't want her to know. "No, ma'am," he said. "It didn't." And Victoria Hayes walked to the elevator and rode up 9 floors to her office, and Ethan Carter stood alone in a dark lobby, holding the wrapper of a terrible turkey sandwich, doing the only kind of math he'd ever really been good at. M.H. M.H., 2 letters. That was all it took to put a man back where he came from. Ethan Carter got home at 10 minutes to 7 that morning, and Lily was already awake, sitting on the 3rd step of the staircase in her school clothes, with her backpack on both shoulders, like she was waiting for a bus that came inside the house. "You didn't come home," she said. "I came home right now." "That's different." He crouched down in front of her, and his knees made a sound they had not made when he was 30. "You're right. It's different. I'm sorry." "Did you fix it?" "Mostly." "Did Tommy keep his job?" Ethan looked at his daughter, 8 years old, who had not asked whether he was tired or whether he had eaten, but had asked about a man who once gave her a candy cane, and he thought not for the first time that whatever he was doing wrong, he had not done everything wrong. "Tommy kept his job," he said. "Okay." She stood up and adjusted her straps. "Then you can sleep." He did not sleep. He drove her to school, and then he drove back downtown, and by 9:15, he was standing in the corridor outside the 22nd floor conference room with a clipboard in his hand and a report he had typed one-handed on his phone at a red light, waiting to be told when he could come in. He waited 40 minutes. At 9:55, The door opened, and Marcus Hale came out with his jacket over his arm and his phone against his ear. And he stopped mid-sentence and looked at Ethan like he had found something on the bottom of his shoe that was not going to come off easy. "You're still here." "I was told to report at 9. You were told to be available at 9. There's a difference." Hale lowered the phone. "Word to the wise Carter. When you're in a room with the board, you don't volunteer. You answer what you're asked in the fewest words available, and then you stop. You understand what I'm saying to you?" "I think so." "Say it back." Ethan looked at him for a second. "You want me to say we don't know why it failed," he said. "I want you to say what's true. We don't know why it failed. I know why it failed. You have a theory. I have 11 requisitions." Hale put his phone in his pocket. He did it slowly, and Ethan understood that the slowness was the point. The way a man rolling up his sleeves is not doing it because he is warm. "Those requisitions are internal working documents," Hale said. "They're not evidence, they're not testimony, and they're not yours. They're the company's. And if the company decides they were filed by a supervisor trying to build himself an insurance policy against his own negligence, that's a conversation you do not want to be in. That's not what they are. I know what they are." Hale smiled with the bottom half of his face only. "I read every single one of them, son. Twice. That's how I know exactly how they'll look to somebody who's never held a wrench." He walked away. Ethan stood in that corridor with his clipboard, and he was still standing there at 10:04 when the door opened again and Victoria Hayes came out with 3 vice presidents behind her, and she walked past him without slowing down, without turning her head, without one flicker of recognition on her face. He had spent 19 hours in a boiler room with her. She had eaten a terrible sandwich on the floor 8 feet from him. She had slept on his shoulder for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and he had let his arm die rather than move it. She walked past him like he was a fire extinguisher. And Ethan Carter, who had learned a long time ago how to swallow a thing whole and keep walking, said, "Yes, ma'am," out loud to nobody, and went back down to the shop. At 11:20. That same morning, the shop phone rang. Ray answered it and then held it out with an expression Ethan had never seen on him. "It's the 22nd floor." "Hale." "No." Ethan took it. "Carter." "Do you have your requisitions?" No greeting, no name, just her voice flat and fast. "Copies, paper." "Where?" "In a file box under my bench." "Why paper?" "Because paper doesn't get deleted, Victoria." There was a pause on the line that lasted long enough for Ray to look up from what he was doing. "Bring the box," she said. "Freight elevator, don't sign in at the desk." "Ma'am, protocol says any physical documentation going upstairs has to be logged through Mr. Hale's office." "I'm aware of what protocol says. I wrote it." Another pause. "That was a mistake I'm correcting in about 9 minutes. Bring the box." She hung up. Ethan stood there holding a dead phone, and Ray said, "Boss, whatever that was, be careful." "It's a box of paperwork." "It's a box of paperwork that 11 men in this building would light on fire," Ray said. "Be careful." At 11:41, Ethan Carter set a file box on the desk of the chief executive officer of Hayes Technologies, and she did not open it right away. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. "Sit down." "I'm fine standing." "Carter, in the last 12 hours, you have kicked a door off its hinges, thrown me into a wall, and eaten a sandwich on my floor. You can sit in a chair." He sat. She opened the box. She read for 11 minutes without saying one word. He watched her go through them in order March to October, and he watched her stop on the June one, the one he had written the same afternoon. Hale came down to the shop, the one where he had typed the sentence, "I am filing this request with the understanding that it will be denied," because he had been angry and had not cared. She put her finger on that line. "You wrote this knowing he'd read it?" "Yes." "That's not a requisition, that's a letter." "It's both." "Who taught you to do that?" Ethan thought about it. "My father worked 26 years at a steel finishing plant in Gary," he said. "In 1994, a press came down on a man named Dennis Whitmore and took his hand off, and the plant said, Dennis had bypassed a guard. My father had filed 4 maintenance tickets on that guard. On paper. And he stood up in a room full of lawyers and put those 4 tickets on a table, and Dennis Whitmore got taken care of for the rest of his life. And your father. They found a reason 8 months later. Victoria closed the folder. That's the part you left out last night, she said. You didn't ask. I'm asking now. He got let go in the spring, Ethan said. And he never worked in a plant again, and he never once told me he regretted it. Not one time. And I asked him, ma'am. When I was 15 and we were losing the house, I asked him straight out if it was worth it, and he said, Ethan, they can take the job. They can't take the part of you that knew. Victoria Hayes sat very still behind her desk. So when Marcus told you he'd find somebody who understood the difference between broken and inconvenient, she said, I filed 2 more. Because they can take the job. They can't take the part of me that knew. She stood up, walked to the door and opened it. For 1 full second, Ethan thought he was being dismissed, and something in his chest went down like a freight elevator. Then she said out into the outer office, Denise, cancel my 11:45, my 1 o'clock, and Marcus, all 3. Ms. Hayes, Mr. Hale has the investor packet at 1 he's been asking since Monday. I know what he's been asking since Monday, Victoria said. Cancel him. She shut the door and came back and sat down and pulled the file box toward her with both hands. Now, she said, walk me through all 11. They were in that office for 4 hours. At 3 in the afternoon, she signed every capital request in the box retroactive to date of filing, and she initialed the June 1 twice, once on the signature line and once next to the sentence he had written in anger. At 4:15, Marcus Hale walked into the shop. He came all the way down past the loading dock, past the parts cage in a suit that cost more than Ray's truck, and he stood in the middle of a concrete floor with his hands in his pockets and looked around like a man appraising a property he intended to sell. Where's your box, Carter? Upstairs. That's what I heard. Hale nodded slowly. You know, when I was 30, I had a guy who worked for me at Corvin Industrial. Sharp guy. Good hands. And he decided the way to get ahead was to go around me instead of through me. He looked at Ethan. You know where that guy is now? No, sir. Neither do I. That's my point. Ray stood up from the bench. Sit down, Delacroix, Hale said without looking at him. Nobody's talking to you. Then don't talk in my shop, Ray said. Hale turned his head then, and Ethan stepped between them. Not fast, not dramatic, just a man moving 1 step to the left. Mr. Hale, is there something you need? I need you to understand something. Hale's voice dropped into a register that was almost friendly, which was worse. Victoria Hayes is under more pressure right now than you have the equipment to imagine. Cordova Systems is eating 6% of our accounts a quarter. The board is looking for a reason, and when a board is looking for a reason, they don't look up. They look down. They look for the guy in the basement. He tapped his own chest. I have kept that board off her back for 4 years. 4 years. And I am not going to watch her burn goodwill. She cannot afford defending a maintenance supervisor with a martyr complex. So here's what happens. You keep your head down, you fix your machines, and you let the adults handle the adult problems. And if I don't, Hale smiled. Then I'll be very sorry about what happens next, he said. I'll say that to your face and I'll mean it, and it'll happen anyway. He left. Ray waited until the freight door shut. Boss? I know. He said her. I know. He said her name like he owns it. Ray. I'm just saying what my ears heard, Ray said, and went back to his bench. And Ethan Carter stood in his own shop with a wrench in his hand and thought about 2 letters glowing on a cracked phone screen at 3:11 in the morning, and about a man who had just spent 4 minutes explaining in great detail how much he had personally sacrificed for Victoria Hayes. M.H. It fit. That was the thing. It fit like a socket on a bolt. On Wednesday, Ethan's schedule changed. He noticed it at 6 in the morning when he badged in, and the board showed him off at 3 o'clock instead of 7. He assumed it was an error and went to the scheduling office, and a woman named Charlene, who had worked there since 2006, looked at her screen and then looked at him. It's not an error. It's got to be. I'm on second half of a double. It was reassigned. By who? Charlene turned her monitor around 3 inches so he could see it, and then turned it right back, which was the most she was legally willing to do for anybody. The authorization initials were VH. "There's a note," Charlene said carefully. "It says, and I'm reading it exactly, Supervisor Carter is off at 3 on the 14th and the 28th of every month going forward. This is not negotiable, and is not to be traded, covered, or volunteered away, including by him." Ethan stood there. "The 14th, he said. "That's what it says." The 14th was Lily's birthday. He had put it on one form one time 11 months ago in a box on a personnel sheet labeled Dependent, Date of Birth, and he had never said it out loud to a single person in that building. He went up at 3:15 that afternoon, and Denise said Ms. Hayes was in back-to-back meetings until 7, and Ethan said that was fine. He would leave a message, and Denise handed him a pad. He wrote 4 words on it. "Thank you, she's 8. At 7:40 that night, his phone buzzed at the kitchen table while Lily was doing long division and complaining about it. It said, 9 is better. Tell her." He looked at it for a long time. "Dad?" "Yeah." "You have the line again." Lily pointed her pencil at his forehead. "But it's a different line." "There's different lines." "Yeah, that one's the good one." She went back to her division. "You had it at Christmas when Grandma sent the box." For the next 5 weeks, they built the retrofit together. That was how Ethan thought of it afterward. Not the project, not the capital plan. The retrofit, capital R. The thing that took 22 nights out of his life and gave him back something he had not expected to want again. Victoria stopped taking the executive elevator. She started coming down through the freight side because it was 11 seconds faster, and because she said the executive elevator had a mirror in it. She learned the names of every man on Ethan's crew inside of 2 weeks, which nobody upstairs had done in 11 years. She called Ray Delacroix, and Ray pretended to hate it and then started introducing himself that way to other people. And she asked questions. That was the thing that undid Ethan slowly over a period of about a month. She asked questions like a person who did not care how the question made her look. "Why is this pipe wrapped and that one isn't? Why do you always check that gauge twice? Why does Marcus's floor stay 68 degrees when the 6th floor is 74? And don't tell me it's the thermostats, Carter. I've read the thermostats." "Because the 6th floor is sales," Ethan said, "and sales doesn't complain to facilities. Sales complains to their own director, who complains to Mr. Hale, who tells them it's being handled." "Is it being handled?" "No, ma'am. It's being absorbed." "By who?" "By the guys on 6 who bring in their own fans." Victoria Hayes stood in a mechanical room at 9 o'clock at night and closed her eyes. "How many things are like this?" she said. "In the building. In my company." Ethan thought about lying. He thought about it seriously for about 2 seconds. "Most of them," he said. "They ate on the floor of that mechanical room more times than either of them ever admitted to another human being. She brought food up from a place on Kinsey the first week, and he stopped her the second week and said if she bought again, he was going to feel like an employee, and she said, 'You are an employee,' and he said, 'Then let me be a person for 40 minutes. And she never bought again. They split whatever he brought. She got very serious about his sandwiches, which were terrible, and she told him so, and he told her that a man who cuts crusts off for a living loses perspective. On the 9th of December at 8:50 at night, she said something that changed the temperature of the whole thing. "Can I ask you something rude?" "Sure." "Why do you talk to me like that?" "Like what?" "Like I'm a person in a room." She was not looking at him. She was looking at a gauge she did not need to look at. "Everyone else talks to me one of 2 ways. Either they talk up, which is management and investors and the board, and that's a performance, and I can hear the performance. Or they talk down, which is what men do when a woman who looks like me is in charge of them, and that's also a performance. It's just a nastier one." She finally looked over. "You don't do either one. And I have spent 4 weeks trying to figure out what you want, and I can't find it, and it's making me insane. I don't want anything." "Everybody wants something." "I want the compressor," Ethan said. "You already signed for the compressor." And Victoria laughed. And then she caught herself, and her hand came up over her mouth the way it had at midnight in a boiler room, fast, reflexive, apologetic. Ethan set his coffee down. "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "That." He nodded at her hand. "You've done it every single time you've laughed in front of me. 4 times. I've been counting since the sandwich." She lowered her hand slowly. "You've been counting." "I notice things. It's the entire job." "It's nothing." "Victoria." "It's a habit." "From where?" And she told him. She did not mean to. He could see that she did not mean to, that she got 2 sentences in, and understood she was already too far down the road to turn the truck around. "There was a girl in the 8th grade named Alicia Brand, who told me my laugh sounded like a farm animal," she said. "That's it. That's the whole story. 32 years old, I run a company with 410 employees, and I put my hand over my mouth because of a girl in the 8th grade. She shook her head. "And the worst part is, I know how stupid it is. Knowing doesn't do anything. That's what nobody tells you. You can know a thing is stupid, and it can still run your entire face." Ethan didn't say anything for a second. When Sarah died, he said, "I stopped being able to be in the produce section." Victoria looked up. "Not the store," he said. "The store's fine, the produce section, because that's where she'd stand and pick things up and put them down and take 11 minutes about it, and I used to lose my mind about the 11 minutes. And for a year and a half, I bought all my vegetables frozen from the back wall because I could not walk into that part of the store." He turned his cup a half turn on the floor. "And every single person who knew about it told me it was irrational, every one, and they were right, and it didn't matter one bit." "How'd you fix it?" Lily asked for a peach. Victoria did not say anything. "Just asked for a peach," Ethan said. "Wasn't a big moment. She was 5 and she wanted a peach and I wasn't going to tell her no, so I walked in there and got one." He shrugged. "Cried in a parking lot for 10 minutes and then drove home, but I went in." The mechanical room was quiet except for the machine. "Nobody talks to me like this," Victoria said. "Nobody talks to me like this either," said Ethan. On the 14th of December, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Ethan Carter was walking out of the building with his jacket half on when Denise called down and said Ms. Hayes needed him on 22 for 4 minutes and would not take a no. He went up angry. He would admit that later. He went up in his coat with his jaw set because it was 3 o'clock on the 14th and there was a cake in his kitchen with 8 candles in a drawer. Victoria was standing outside her office door. "4 minutes," he said. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm going to hold you to 4 minutes. You're going to hold me to 1. She opened the door. Lily Carter was sitting in the CEO's chair with her feet not touching the ground, spinning slowly, holding a can of orange soda with both hands. "Dad." Ethan did not move. "Mrs. Kowalski brought her at 2:30, Victoria said quietly beside him. "I called her yesterday. I hope that was all right. I didn't want you to do the drive. You called my neighbor. You listed her as your emergency contact 11 months ago. Dad, this chair spins. I see that, baby. It spins all the way." Ethan turned his head to say something to Victoria and found that he could not at that particular moment produce a sentence. And Victoria Hayes looked at the floor and said very fast, "It's a chair. It's not a big deal. I have a chair. She likes the chair." And that was how Ethan learned that the most formidable woman in Chicago got nervous when someone thanked her. Lily stopped spinning. "Are you the boss?" "I am. Of my dad. Of everybody." Lily considered this with enormous seriousness. "My dad says you're the only one upstairs who says thank you." Victoria's face did something complicated. "Your dad's being generous." "He's not, though," Lily said. "He doesn't do that." And she went back to spinning. They ate cake in the CEO's office at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday off paper plates. Denise found in a supply closet, and at 4:30, Marcus Hale opened the door without knocking and stopped dead. Nobody said anything for 3 full seconds. "Marcus," Victoria said. "This is Lily. It's her birthday." Hale looked at the child in the chair. He looked at the cake. He looked at Ethan Carter standing in a CEO's office in a canvas jacket with his father's name on the pocket. "Happy birthday," he said to Lily. "Thank you," said Lily. And then Marcus Hale looked at Victoria and said in a voice pitched exactly right for a room with a child in it. "Vic, when you have a minute." Cordova filed. "It's the whole architecture claim. Legal wants us both at 7. Vic." Ethan felt it land somewhere under his ribs. Victoria's whole posture changed. Her shoulders went back. Her chin came up. She became in about a second and a half the woman who had walked past him in a corridor like he was a fire extinguisher. 7, she said. "Conference 2. I'll have the packet." "Thank you, Marcus." He shut the door. Lily kept spinning. Ethan Carter stood in that office and thought about a sentence on a cracked screen. "I wish he saw me the way I see him." And about how a man in a suit had just walked in and shortened her name to one syllable, like it belonged to him, and she had let him, and something in her face had gone up and locked shut, and it had happened in the space of a heartbeat. "Carter, ma'am." She stopped. She always stopped at that word now. "Take your daughter home," she said. "That's an order." He took his daughter home. He put her to bed at 8:40 with orange soda still on her chin, and he sat on the edge of her bed longer than he needed to, and Lily said half asleep. "Dad is the boss lady, sad." "Why would you say that?" "Because when you went to get the plates, she said, 'You have a nice dad,' and then she made her face like this." Lily, without opening her eyes, made an expression. It was a very good expression. It was a woman being cheerful at a child. "That's just her face, sweetheart." "That's the face people make at me at school," Lily said, "when they know about Mom." Ethan sat there in the dark for a while after she fell asleep. On the 19th of December at 11:20 in the morning, it started. Ethan was under the number 4 unit, with his shoulder in a place. A shoulder does not belong, when Ray's boots came up beside him and stopped. "Boss. Hand me the 3/4. Boss, you need to come out from under there." Ethan came out from under there. There were 2 men from corporate security standing in his shop with a rolling cart, and they were putting the file box on it. His file box. The paper. "Excuse me, that's my documentation." "It's a records hold," one of them said. He did not look unhappy about it. He did not look like anything at all. "Everything from this department. Requisitions, work orders, badge logs, and your terminal." "On whose authority?" The man held up a printed sheet, and Ethan read it standing up, and the words that mattered were in the 3rd line. "Pursuant to internal investigation into unauthorized disclosure of proprietary system architecture to Cordova Systems." And at the bottom, where a name goes, the initials were not VH. "Where's this coming from?" Ethan said. 22nd floor. "Which office?" The security man looked at him then for the first time with something that was almost pity. "Which office do you think?" he said. Ethan did not raise his voice. That was the thing Ray talked about later to anybody who would listen for the next several years. He did not raise his voice, and he did not put a hand on anybody, and he did not say one word he would have to take back. He said, "Can I have 4 minutes to make a copy of 1 page?" "No. It's a page with my daughter's birthday on it." "I'm sorry," the security man said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. "It's everything from this department. That's the language." "Then take it," Ethan said. At 11:52 that morning, he called the 22nd floor from the wall phone in the shop, and Denise picked up on the second ring the way she always did. "Ms. Hayes's office." "Denise, it's Carter." There was a pause. It was a small pause, and it told him everything. "She's in with legal," Denise said. "I need 90 seconds. "Ethan." She had never once used his first name. "She's in with legal and Mr. Hale, and 2 people from a firm downtown, and the door has been shut since 9:15, and I have been told not to interrupt for any reason." Another pause. "For any reason." Those were the words. Whose words? Denise did not answer that. "I'm going to write down that you called," she said. "I'm going to write it on paper." 11:52. At 1:15 2 men came down and asked him to walk out with them. They were polite about it. That was somehow the worst part. They walked him through the loading dock and around the side of the building instead of through the freight corridor. And Ethan understood that this was a mercy, Somebody had arranged so he would not have to walk past the shop with an escort, and he did not know whether to be grateful or sick. Then they got to the turnstiles. He had walked through those turnstiles 4,000 times. He had personally rebuilt the left one in 2022 when the gate arm started sticking. And he put his badge on the reader, and the reader made a sound he had never heard. It made a flat little tone, and the light went red. There were maybe 15 people in that lobby. "It's deactivated," one of the men said quietly. "You'll need to hand it over." Ethan took the badge off his belt clip. His hands were steady. He would think about that later too, how steady his hands were when the rest of him was going down an elevator shaft. "There's a filter change due on the 12th floor air handler Thursday," he said. "It's a non-standard size. It's in the cage on the 3rd shelf. Tell Ray it's the one with the blue tape on it, or he'll order the wrong one, and it won't come in till January." "Sir, the blue tape," Ethan said. "That's it. That's all I've got to say." He handed over the badge and walked out onto the street. At 3:10 that afternoon, he was sitting in his truck outside Lily's school 40 minutes early because there was nowhere else on earth to be. She came out with her backpack on both shoulders, and she stopped when she saw the truck, and she got in, and she looked at him for about 4 seconds. "You're early." "I am." "You're never early." "Today I'm early." Lily buckled her seatbelt. She was 8 years old, and she had lost a mother and children who have lost something. Learned to read a room the way other people read a clock. "Did you get fired?" Ethan put both hands on the wheel and looked straight ahead at a chain-link fence. He had a whole thing prepared. He had built it in the truck over the last 40 minutes, a nice clean sentence about how sometimes grown-ups take a little break from work, and it was sitting right there in his mouth, and he could not make himself say it. "Not yet," he said. "But they might." "For what?" "They think I gave away something that belonged to the company." "Did you?" "No." "Then you'll be fine," Lily said, and pulled her seatbelt strap away from her neck the way she always did, and that was it. That was the entire conversation, and Ethan Carter had to sit in a school parking lot for another minute and a half before he trusted himself to drive. At 8:40 that night, Ray Delacroix knocked on his front door. He had a coat on over his work shirt, and he did not come in past the mat. "They took my terminal too," Ray said. "And Marcus's people asked me questions for 2 hours." "What kind of questions?" "What kind you think? Did you ever see Carter with documents he shouldn't have? Did Carter ever talk about money? Did Carter ever express resentment about being passed over?" Ray's jaw worked. "I told him you got passed over 4 times and never said one word about it, and the lady wrote down never said one word about it like it was a confession." "Ray. And then she asked me if you'd been spending a lot of time alone with Ms. Hayes." The house got very quiet. "That's what they're building," Ray said. "You understand, it ain't just the leak. They're building the other thing next to it. So when it comes out, it don't sound like a man who got framed. It sounds like a guy in the basement who got ideas above his station." Ethan sat down on the second step of his own staircase. "Boss, there's one more thing." Ray reached inside his coat. "You know how you're always yelling at me about the plotter?" "The plotter." "The big one in the facilities corridor. That prints the mechanical drawings. You've been telling me for 2 years to log the counter every Friday because you think the manufacturer's cheating us on the service contract." "I do think that. I logged it," Ray said. "Every Friday. On paper. In a composition notebook that lives in my truck, and not in that building." He held it out. "They took the department. They didn't take my truck." Ethan took the notebook. "Ray." "Don't say nothing yet." Ray was already backing off the porch. "Look at November 2nd, at 9:05 that night. Ethan Carter sat at his kitchen table with a composition notebook, a legal pad and a calculator, and worked the way his father had taught him, which is to say, slowly in pen with everything written down. The counter on that plotter had moved 411 pages between the Friday before and the Friday after the 2nd of November. 411 pages. His entire department printed maybe 60 pages a week, and half of those were filter schedules. He wrote the number down. He circled it twice. And then he sat back in his chair in a dark kitchen at 9:40 at night and started laughing. One short, ugly laugh, because for 8 months he had been begging that building to look at a piece of machinery, and now a piece of machinery was the only thing in the world that could save him. At 10:50 that night, headlights came up the driveway. Ethan looked out the front window and did not move for a second, because the car in his driveway did not belong on his street. Then the door opened, and Victoria Hayes got out in a coat with a grease stripe on it that she had never had cleaned. He met her on the porch. "You didn't answer your phone," she said. "They took my work phone. You've never had my other one." "That's a fair point." She stayed on the bottom step. "Can I come in?" "My daughter's asleep upstairs." "Then I'll stand here." "It's 19 degrees. Ethan." It was the first time she had ever used his first name, and it landed in the middle of his chest like a dropped tool. "Please, I need to look at your face when I ask you this." He opened the door, and she came in and stood in his front hallway. This woman worth a number with a zip code next to a coat rack with a child's pink hat hanging off it. "Did you give anything to Cordova Systems?" "No." "Did you talk to anyone from Cordova at a conference at a bar at your kid's soccer game anywhere?" "No." "Did you ever print system architecture documents?" "I print filter schedules and valve diagrams. I have never in my life printed anything about the network architecture, because I don't know what the network architecture is. I keep the room it lives in at 68 degrees. "Say the first one again." "No," Ethan said. "I didn't do it." Victoria Hayes stood in that hallway and closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, something in her had changed load the way a machine does when you take weight off one side. "Okay," she said. "That's it. Carter, I have been in a room for 13 hours with people who lie for a living, and I have gotten very good at knowing what it sounds like." She pulled a folded paper out of her coat. "Now I need you to look at this and not say anything for 10 seconds. It was a printed email. It was from his terminal, his account time-stamped the 2nd of November at 11:41 at night, and it was addressed to a Gmail address he had never seen, and the body said, "Attached is what we discussed. Second half on receipt." Ethan looked at it. "That's not mine. It has your login. Victoria." He put the paper down on the little table by the door. "On the 2nd of November at 11:41 at night, where was I?" She frowned. "In the plant. The East Electrical Room went at 1:15. We were down there from 10:30. "That's right." "That's not an alibi, that's a coincidence. Your terminal is in the shop. The shop is 40 feet from the plant, and any prosecutor in this city would say you walked out of a boiler room, sent an email, and walked back in." "They would," Ethan agreed. "Except that terminal locks after 4 minutes and needs a badge tap to wake." Victoria went absolutely still. "Badge logs," she said. "Badge logs are facilities. They're not IT and they're not security. They're mine." He said it flatly. "Or they were mine. They were in the box." "They were in the box. Every physical record from my department is in a box on the 22nd floor," Ethan said, "in the custody of the office that ordered it taken." Victoria Hayes sat down uninvited on the second step of his staircase, the exact step his daughter waited on in the mornings, and put her face in her hands for about 3 seconds. Then she looked up. "Say his name." "I'd like to keep my job." "You don't have a job. As of 1:15 this afternoon, you are suspended without pay, and I found out about it at 4:20 from a compliance memo, which is a thing that has never happened to me in 11 years in my own company." Her voice was rising. She caught it. She brought it back down with visible effort. "Say his name." "Marcus Hale," Ethan said. "Why?" "Because he denied 11 requisitions on a machine he knew would fail, and then he took the paper that proved it the same week he needed somebody else's name on a leak." "That's motive for burying you. That's not motive for selling the company out." "No, ma'am," Ethan said. "That part I don't have." And Victoria Hayes, sitting on a staircase in a maintenance supervisor's house at 11:15 at night, said very quietly, "I might." "Ma'am, Cordova has been trying to buy us for 2 years. 2 years. I've said no 4 times." She was not looking at him. "The last offer came in September. It had a term sheet with a management retention schedule attached to it. Do you know what a management retention schedule is? No. It's a list of who keeps their job after the sale and what they get for staying." She swallowed. There were 6 names on it. Mine was not one of them. And the person listed as continuing president of the Chicago division was Marcus. Ethan stood in his own hallway with his hands at his sides. You saw that in September. I saw it in September, and I told myself it was a negotiating tactic, Victoria said. I told myself Cordova put his name on it to try to split us. I told myself Marcus has kept the board off my back for 4 years, and I owe him better than that. She laughed once, and it was a terrible sound. And then I put the term sheet in a drawer, and I did not ask him about it, not once. Because I did not want to be the woman who accuses the one man in that building who ever went to bat for her. Victoria. Don't. She stood up. Don't be kind about it. I had it in a drawer for 3 months, and this morning they walked a man out of my building in front of 15 people. At 11:40 that night, standing in a hallway with a child's hat on the coat rack, they built it. She wrote on his legal pad. He talked, and she wrote, and it took an hour and 10 minutes, and by the end, there were 4 things on that pad. The first was Ray's composition notebook and 411 pages. The second was that the plotter in the facilities corridor does not print anything until somebody walks up to the machine and taps a badge to release the job, because Ethan had set it up that way in 2021 after somebody left a set of blueprints sitting in the tray for 2 days. The third was that the plotter keeps its own release log in memory on the device for 180 days, and that log is not on the network, and it had not been in any box because it was inside a 900-pound printer that nobody in that building except one man had ever opened. The fourth was the thing that made Victoria put the pen down. There's a camera in the freight corridor, Ethan said. There's no camera in the freight corridor. Security's map shows a dead zone. Security's map is from 2018. He rubbed the back of his neck. In 2021, we had a guy stealing copper. Fittings wire $3,000 a month. I asked for a camera. Guess who denied it? Marcus. So I pulled a dead unit out of the parking structure and I ran it off the mechanical room panel, and I've been recording that corridor onto a hard drive in the ceiling of my own shop for 4.5 years. He looked at her. It's not on anybody's system. It's not on anybody's map. And it does not have a red light on it because the red light burned out in 2022 and I never replaced it. Victoria Hayes looked up from the legal pad. You are telling me, she said slowly, that for 4.5 years there has been an unlogged camera pointed at the only corridor in my building that people use when they don't want to be seen. Yes, ma'am. And nobody knows. Ray knows. Ray put the ladder up. Victoria stood there for a second, and then she did something Ethan did not expect at all. She put her hand over her mouth. And then she caught herself doing it, and she pulled her hand away deliberately, and she laughed out loud in a stranger's hallway at 10 minutes to 1 in the morning. Full volume, the way a person laughs when they have been holding something for 13 hours. Upstairs, a door opened. Lily came down 4 steps in her pajamas, squinting. Dad, who's yelling? Nobody's yelling, baby. Lily looked past him. She looked at Victoria Hayes, standing in her front hallway at 1 in the morning, in a coat with a grease stripe on it. Oh, Lily said. It's the chair lady. At 6:40 the next morning, Ray Delacroix and a badge that had not been deactivated because nobody upstairs had thought about Ray for 1 single second went into the facilities corridor and pulled a service log off a 900-pound printer. At 7:15, he went up a ladder in a shop he was not technically supposed to be in and came down with a hard drive. At 8:50, Denise on the 22nd floor made 3 photocopies of a management retention schedule dated September 9th, put one in an envelope, and mailed it to herself at her home address because she had worked in corporate offices for 26 years and she did not trust a single thing that lived in a building. At 2 in the afternoon on the 21st of December, the board of Hayes Technologies met in conference room 2 on the 22nd floor. There were 9 of them, plus 2 attorneys, plus a man from the investment group that had put in the Series C, a thin man named Prentice, who had said the phrase reputational exposure 4 times before anybody sat down. Marcus Hale had the packet. I want to be clear that this gives me no pleasure, he said. Ethan Carter has been with this company 6 years. He's a hard worker. He's got a kid. But we have a time-stamped transmission from his terminal. We have a pattern of documented grievance going back 9 months, And we have a department that lost a piece of critical infrastructure the same week the transmission went out. He set the folder down. I recommend termination for cause, and I recommend we refer it to the U.S. Attorney's Office, because if we don't refer it, Cordova's counsel will say we buried it. And how quickly can that be done? Prentice said. Today. Then let's do it today. No, Victoria said. Prentice turned. Ms. Hayes, with respect, the exposure here is not theoretical. I'm aware of the exposure. I built the thing that's exposed. She stood up. Marcus, before we vote, I want to ask you one question, and I want you to think about it before you answer, because I am going to remember your answer for the rest of my life. The room went quiet. Did you print anything on the facilities plotter on the night of November 2nd? Marcus Hale's face did not move. That was the tell. A man asked a strange question makes a strange face. Marcus Hale's face did nothing at all. I don't think I've ever used the facilities plotter, he said. Take your time. Victoria. I don't know what this is, but if you have something, put it on the table. That's the second thing I was going to ask you, she said. Whether you wanted me to put it on the table. She put 411 pages on the table. Then she put a printer release log on the table. Then she put a screenshot on the table, and the screenshot had a timestamp in the corner that read November 2nd at 11:39 in the evening, and it was a man in a suit standing at a 900-pound plotter in a freight corridor with a badge in his hand. And then she put the management retention schedule on the table, dated September 9th, with 6 names on it, and hers not among them. Marcus Hale looked at the table for a long time. That corridor doesn't have a camera, he said. That's the sentence, isn't it? Victoria said quietly. That's the whole thing right there. Not that isn't me. Not I can explain the timestamp. She sat down. Marcus, that corridor doesn't have a camera. Nobody in that room said anything for 11 seconds. Then Marcus Hale did something nobody expected, which was that he sat back in his chair and rubbed his eye with the heel of his hand like a tired man at the end of a shift. You were going to run this company into the ground, he said. Marcus. No, you asked, so I'm going to say it and then I'll go. He looked up, and his voice was not a villain's voice. It was worse. It was reasonable. Cordova was going to take us in 18 months either way. Either we sold at a number with a structure with people keeping their jobs, or we bled out account by account and got bought at a fire sale with nothing for anybody. I ran that math 9 ways. I brought it to you 4 times. And 4 times you sat in that chair and told me this company wasn't for sale because it had your mother's name in the founding documents. Victoria's face changed. Don't. You told me that yourself, in this room. Don't you say one word about my mother. 410 people work here, Hale said. I made a decision to protect as many of them as I could, and the price of the decision was one guy in the basement, and I told myself he'd land on his feet, because guys like that always do. He stood up and buttoned his jacket because 30 years of habit does not care what day it is. That's the part I'd take back, not the rest of it, just that part. You had 2 security officers walk him past 15 people, Marcus. Yes, Hale said. I did. He left the room. He was in the lobby by 2:40. He never came back into that building again. At 3:50 that afternoon, Victoria Hayes did the thing that changed everything, and she did it on purpose, and she did it standing up. She had the entire company brought onto a call, all 410 of them, every floor, the sales floor with the fans, the parts cage, the loading dock. And she said this. Yesterday afternoon, this company walked a man out of the lobby in front of his coworkers on an accusation that was manufactured by an executive of this company. His name is Ethan Carter. He is a maintenance supervisor. Between March and October, he filed 11 capital requests, warning us that our cooling plant was going to fail, and every one of them was denied. And on November 2nd, it failed exactly the way he said it would. And he stayed in that building for 19 hours, saving 400 customer accounts for people who could not have picked him out of a photograph. She paused. He is reinstated effective immediately with full back pay. The suspension is expunged. And on Monday morning, I am going to stand in that lobby personally at 7 o'clock, and I am going to walk him back in through the same turnstile, because we took something from him in public, and I am not going to give it back to him in private. Prentice from the investment group sent an email at 4:02 that used the phrase seriously ill-advised. Victoria Hayes read it, wrote back the word noted, and put her phone face down. At 9 that night she called Ethan and asked him to meet her at the building. He came. She let him in through the freight door herself because he did not have a badge yet, and they rode the freight elevator up to 22, and they sat down on the floor of that same dark lobby with their backs against that same wall. She had 2 vending machine sandwiches. "You're kidding," Ethan said. "There's a word on the wrapper that says turkey," Victoria said. "That's as far as anybody's willing to commit." They ate. It was objectively still terrible. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said, "and you're going to want to hit me again." "That's a strong open. The night the plant went down, you fell asleep." He turned the sandwich over in his hands. "At 3:11, your phone lit up on the floor between us, and I read what was on it. I didn't touch it. I didn't unlock it. But I read it, and I've been carrying it around for 7 weeks, and if I don't say it out loud right now, I'm going to keep carrying it." Victoria had stopped chewing. "What did it say?" "You know what it said." "Ethan, what did it say?" "It said I wish he saw me the way I see him." The floor of that lobby was very quiet. "And I read it," Ethan said, "and for about a second and a half I was the happiest I've been since 2021. And then I looked at the top of the thread and I saw the name it was going to, and it said M.H. He set the sandwich down. "And I've spent 7 weeks being a professional about it. And that's fine. That's completely fine. But this morning you put a camera on a table and got a man fired for me, and I'm not going to sit on this floor and pretend I don't know." Victoria Hayes put her hand over her mouth, not to hide a laugh. Ethan saw it happen and saw the difference immediately, and something in his stomach dropped to floor. "Say that name again," she said. "M.H. Ethan." Her voice came apart in the middle of it. "M.H. is Margaret Hayes." He did not move. "That's my mother," she said. "That's my mother's phone. She died 3 years ago in February, and I never canceled the line. I pay $11 a month for a phone number that goes to a recording, and I have been writing her messages for 3 years, and I have never sent one of them, not one, because I know exactly where they'd go." Ethan Carter sat on the floor of a dark lobby and could not make a sound. "Do you want to know when I wrote that one?" Victoria said. "I wrote it at 2:40 in the morning, sitting 8 feet away from you right there while you were talking about your father and a man named Dennis Whitmore. I typed it with my thumbs under my coat like a 15-year-old, and then I put the phone down and I fell asleep on you, which I have thought about every single day since." "Victoria, I was talking about you," she said. "The whole message was about you. I was telling my dead mother that a man in a canvas jacket looked at me for 19 hours and never once looked at me the way everybody looks at me, and I was asking her what I was supposed to do about it, because she's the only person I've ever been able to ask." Ethan finally got a word out. "You thought I didn't see you." "I thought you saw a boss. I saw a woman put a flashlight over Ray Delacroix's shoulder for 11 minutes in a 104-degree room and then tell him he was the one with his arm in the machine," Ethan said. "That's the first thing I ever saw. Everything since then has just been more of it." And Victoria Hayes started to cry, and she put her hand up over her face, out of pure reflex, and Ethan Carter reached over and took her wrist gently, the way you handle something that has been dropped too many times. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Not with me. Not ever." She did not pull her hand away. That was the first thing, and Ethan would think about it later more than anything else that happened that night. She did not pull away, and she did not apologize, and she did not make a joke to get the room back, which was the thing she always did. "I don't know how to do this," Victoria said. "Do what?" "Any of it. Be looked at. Be liked." She wiped her face with the back of her free hand. "I know how to run a company. I can read a term sheet in the dark. I do not know how to sit on a floor with a man who has seen me asleep." "Nobody knows how to do that." "You do." "Victoria, I have not been on a date since 2016, Ethan said. "I've got a kid who thinks triangles taste better than rectangles, and I own 4 shirts. I am not the confident party in this hallway." She laughed. Her hand started up toward her mouth and stopped halfway and came back down into her lap on purpose. "There," Ethan said. "Don't make it a thing. It's a thing. At 10 past 10 that night, she drove him home, and neither of them said anything for the first 8 minutes, and then she said, "Monday, 7 o'clock, front lobby. I meant what I said on that call." And Ethan said, "You don't have to do that." And she said, "I know I don't have to." And that was the end of the discussion. At 6:52 on Monday morning, Ethan Carter walked up to the front entrance of Hayes Technologies in a clean canvas jacket with his father's name on the pocket, and stopped on the sidewalk because he could not get to the door. There were people in the way. Ray Delacroix was at the front of it with his arms crossed. Behind him was Marcus from the shop, and Tommy and the two overnight guys who should have been home in bed 6 hours ago. Behind them were maybe 40 people Ethan had never spoken to in his life. The whole 6th floor, the fan people. 2 women from accounts payable. A security officer named Alvarez, who had walked him out 4 days earlier, and who now stood there looking at the floor with his jaw set, like a man at a funeral he had helped cause. Victoria was by the turnstile with a badge in her hand. "Ms. Hayes." "Carter." She held it out. He took it. And then she said loud enough that the whole lobby got it, "That one works." And Ethan Carter put a badge on a reader, and the light went green, and 40 people made a noise he was not remotely prepared for. He got about 4 steps. "Hey," he said and turned around. "Alvarez." The security officer looked up like a man expecting a fist. "The blue tape filter," Ethan said. "Did it get to Ray?" Alvarez's mouth moved twice before anything came out of it. "Thursday morning," he said. "I put it in his hand myself." "Good man." And Ray Delacroix, 31 years on that building, turned around and walked straight into the parts cage so nobody would see his face. At 9:15 that same morning, the governance memo came down. It came from the investment group from Prentice, and it was 4 pages long, and it never once used the word love, and Victoria read all 4 pages standing up in her office with the door shut. The first page was about the camera. The second page was about the camera. The third page was about the fact that the chief executive officer had personally driven to the residence of a suspended employee at 10:50 at night on the 19th of December, a fact that had come from a black car service log, and that in the opinion of counsel, this created what the memo called an appearance issue. The fourth page had a recommendation on it. At 10:40, she called Ethan up and put it on the desk in front of him and said, "Read the 4th page and tell me what you think it says." Ethan read it twice. "It says one of us has to move." "Keep going." "It says that if there's a personal relationship between an executive officer and an employee, the reporting line has to be severed, and since you can't stop being the CEO, the employee has to stop being in the building." He set it down. "It says it very politely." "It says it beautifully," Victoria said. "Prentice has a Yale law degree, and he has used every dollar of it on that paragraph." "Is there a personal relationship?" The question sat there. "I don't know," Victoria said. "Is there?" "I held your wrist on a floor at 9 o'clock last night." "That's not an answer that appears in a memo." "Then let me give you the one that does." Ethan leaned forward. "I'm not leaving that building because a man in a suit is worried about how it looks. I have been the thing in the basement that people are embarrassed about for 6 years. I'm not going to be that in this too." "Nobody's embarrassed." "Victoria." He said it gently. "Your car service reported you to your own board for coming to my house." She sat down. At 11:15, she called Prentice back and said she would take the reporting line change and nothing else. And Prentice said the reporting line change was insufficient, and Victoria said, "Then write it up and bring it to the January meeting, and let's find out what 9 directors think about firing the man they just publicly reinstated." And Prentice said the phrase reputational exposure for the 5th time that month, and Victoria hung up. At 1:40 that afternoon, the second letter arrived. It came by courier, and it was from a firm on LaSalle, and the name at the top of the letterhead was one that Victoria recognized because that firm had once represented her, and the client on whose behalf they were writing was Marcus Hale. Ethan read that one standing up too. "They're saying the camera was illegal. They're saying," Victoria said carefully, "that an unauthorized recording device installed by a non-security employee in a workplace without notice, without approval, running for 4.5 years might constitute a violation of state law and that Mr. Hale reserves all rights. Might. Might is what a lawyer says when he wants you to hear will. Am I going to jail? No. Victoria, you are not going to jail. She put both hands flat on the desk. But there is a version of this where Marcus's counsel makes the entire case about you instead of about him, and the company settles to make it go away. And the settlement has a term in it that says the employee involved is no longer with the company, and everybody upstairs gets to say it was a legal outcome and not a choice. Ethan absorbed that. So he loses, he said, and I still go. That's the version I am not going to allow. You keep saying that. I keep meaning it. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Ethan Carter went and found Ray Delacroix, and they had a conversation that lasted about 90 seconds. Ray, when we put the camera up in 2021. Yeah. Did I do the notice? Ray's eyebrows came together. The what? The notice. The sign. The laminated one. Boss, that was 4 years ago. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. I did the sign, Ethan said. I know I did the sign because I did it wrong the first time and had to redo it because the tape wouldn't hold on painted block. At 5:15, Ray Delacroix stood on a ladder in the freight corridor with a flashlight in his teeth and pulled a run of insulated pipe forward 2 inches and behind it. Filthy curled at the corners, still stuck to the block with construction adhesive. Because the tape had not held, was a laminated 8.5 by 11 sheet that said, "This area may be monitored by video," and under it in Ethan's handwriting in permanent marker, the date and his initials and the words, "No audio." Ray took 41 photographs of it. Boss, he said from the ladder, say it. Say what? Say the thing you always say, about the paper. They can take the job, Ethan said. That's the one, said Ray. At 9:10 the next morning, Victoria's outside counsel looked at 41 photographs and a camera with no microphone in it and said the phrase, "This is a video-only device in a non-private common area of a commercial building with posted notice." And then he said the thing that made Victoria close her eyes, which was, Marcus's people didn't check the wall. Why would they? Because nobody checks the wall, the lawyer said. Ever. At 2:20. That afternoon, the letter from LaSalle was withdrawn quietly in one paragraph, with no explanation, the way those letters always are. At 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve, Victoria Hayes stood on Ethan Carter's porch for the second time in her life, holding a bag from a toy store, and did not knock for a full 40 seconds, and Ethan knew that because he was standing on the other side of the door, listening to her not knock. He opened it. "You've been out there a while. I was rehearsing." "Rehearsing what?" "Hello," Victoria said. Lily came around the corner at a dead run and stopped 4 feet short, suddenly shy, holding her elbow. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Is that for me?" Lily. "It's fine," Victoria said. "Yes, it is. I did not know what you like, so I asked your father, and your father said, and I'm quoting him, 'She likes anything with a lot of small pieces that I will find with my foot at 2 in the morning.'" Lily gasped like she had been personally vindicated in a court of law. At 8:45, with Lily asleep upstairs and 1,000 plastic pieces on the living room floor, Victoria said the thing she had been carrying around all night. "Your wife's coat is in the closet." Ethan went still. "I hung mine up," she said, "and it was right there, and I want you to know I saw it because I am not going to be a person who pretends not to see things in this house. It's a green wool coat." "Yes." 4 years, Ethan said. "I've moved it twice. I've taken it off the hanger and put it on the bed and stood there and then put it back." He rubbed his face. "There's no version of that story where I come off well." "There's no version where you come off badly either." Victoria. "I mean it. I have a phone number I pay $11 a month for," she said. "You have a coat. We're the same animal, Ethan. We just picked different objects." He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "I guess we did." The whispering started the second week of January, and it started of all places in the freight corridor. Ethan came around the corner at 10:15 in the morning with a coil of wire over his shoulder, and heard a voice from the sales floor say, "I'm just saying the guy had 11 denied requisitions in October and a full capital plan by December, and you do the math on what changed." And another voice laughed, and the first voice said, "Hey, no judgment. If that's the ladder, that's the ladder." Ethan stood there with the wire on his shoulder. I thought about 11 things to say. He thought about the fact that he had a daughter and a suspension on a record that had been expunged on paper and would never be expunged in one single human memory in that building, and that a man who makes a scene in a corridor is a man who confirms everything. He walked out and let them see him. The corridor got extremely quiet. "Filters are Thursday," Ethan said. "If your floor's still running hot, put a ticket in and I'll come look at it myself." And he kept walking. He did not tell Victoria. That was his mistake, and he knew it was a mistake in the moment, and he made it anyway, because the whole architecture of Ethan Carter was built on the idea that you carry the weight yourself and you do not put it down in front of anybody. She found out anyway on the 22nd of January at 4:50 in the afternoon from Denise, who had heard it from a woman in accounts payable who had heard it in a corridor. Victoria called him up. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you'd fire somebody." "You're damn right I'd fire somebody." "And then what?" Ethan said. "Then there's 2 of them fired for it, and 40 of them who stop saying it out loud and start saying it in the parking lot, and the parking lot is worse, Victoria. In the parking lot, they get to be right." She sat down hard in her chair. "How long has it been going on?" "Since the 2nd week of January." 3 weeks. "About that." 3 weeks, she said. "And you've been coming up here every night and eating a sandwich on my floor and not saying one word." "Yeah." "Why?" And Ethan said the true thing which he had not planned to say. "Because I didn't want you to look at me and see a cost." At 5:15 on the 29th of January, Lily Carter got into her father's truck outside school and did not say anything for 2 blocks, and Ethan let it run because he had learned that with her you count to 60 and it comes out on its own. It came out at the 3rd light. "Dad, what does it mean when somebody says a person is punching up?" Ethan's hands closed on the wheel. "Where did you hear that?" "Braden Pruitt's mom works at your building." Lily was looking out the window. "He said his mom said you were punching up, and then he said something about the boss lady." "What did he say about her?" "I don't want to say it." "Lil." "He said she was fat," Lily said, and he said it like it was the funny part. Ethan drove another block and a half. "What did you say?" "I said she's the boss of 410 people, and his mom is one of them." Lily's chin was up. "And then Mrs. Alvarado made me sit at the reading table." "You got in trouble." "A little bit." "Lily." Ethan pulled the truck over. He put it in park on a residential street with the heater running. "Look at me. You are not in trouble with me. Not one bit. But I want to tell you something and I want you to actually hear it, not just wait for me to finish." "Okay." There is nothing funny about what that kid said. Not the word, and not the part where he thought it was a joke. He turned in the seat. "There are people in this world who are so scared of not being enough that the only thing that makes them feel okay is finding somebody to point at. That's all that is. Every time. It has never once been about the person they're pointing at." Lily thought about that. "Is that why you never point at anybody?" Ethan opened his mouth and nothing came out. "You don't," Lily said. "You never say bad things about people. Not even Mr. Hale, and he got you fired." "He didn't get me fired." "He tried." "Yeah," Ethan said. "He did." At 7:40 that night, Lily Carter, 8 years old, asked her father for the phone and called Victoria Hayes. Ethan tried to stop her, and she gave him a look he had personally seen on her mother's face 900 times, and he let go of the phone. "Hi, it's Lily." "Hello, Lily. A boy at my school said a bad thing about you." Ethan closed his eyes. There was a pause on the other end. He could hear the exact length of it, and he knew what was happening inside that pause, because he had been watching a woman put her hand over her mouth for 2 months. "What did he say?" Victoria asked, and her voice was completely level, which was how Ethan knew. "He said you were fat," Lily said, "and I told him you're the boss of 410 people." Another pause. That's true, Victoria said. Which part? Both parts. Well, said Lily, I only said the good one. Ethan heard something on the other end of the line that could have been a laugh and could have been the other thing. Lily, Victoria said, can I tell you something and you can tell me if it's a stupid thing to say to a kid? Yeah. When I was your age, I had somebody say something like that to me, and I decided that if I got good enough at things, nobody would ever be allowed to say it again. She stopped. And I got very, very good at things, and people still say it. So it didn't work. It did not work at all. Then what works? Lily said. And Victoria Hayes said, honestly, people like you. And Lily said, okay, in the business-like way of a child accepting a transaction, and handed the phone back to her father and went to get a yogurt. Ethan put the phone to his ear. Victoria. Don't. Are you all right? No, she said, and hung up. At 9:10 she called back. I'm sorry. You don't have to be. I'm going to say something, and I need you to let me get all the way to the end of it before you talk. She took a breath he could hear. I think we should stop. Ethan sat down on the second step of his staircase. There's a memo with my name on it that says you have to leave the building, she said. There are men in my own hallways telling each other you slept your way into a capital budget. There is an 8-year-old girl sitting at a reading table because a child repeated something his mother said in a kitchen. And every single one of those things exists because of me, Ethan. Not because of you. You didn't bring one thing into this. I did. I'm the thing that costs. Are you done? No. Her voice cracked. I have spent 32 years believing that if I ever got something good, there would be a bill, and the bill would come to somebody else. And I was fine with that when it was investors. I am not fine with it when it's a kid at a reading table. Now are you done? Yes. Okay, Ethan said. Here's mine, and it's shorter. Ethan, June 9th, 2021, he said. That's when I decided I was never doing this again. Not out loud, not to anybody, just in my own head, sitting in a parking lot at a hospital. And I have been very good at it. 4 years. I turned down my neighbor's cousin twice, and I told myself it was about Lily, and it was never about Lily. One time, it was about the fact that I could not survive standing in another hallway, hearing another doctor say another sentence. I know. You don't, because here's the part I've never said. When you fell asleep on my shoulder, I sat there for 2 hours with my arm dead, and about halfway through I realized I wasn't scared. He stopped. And that scared the hell out of me. Because if I'm not scared, that means I'm in it. And if I'm in it, then someday there's a hallway, and a doctor, or there's a memo, or there's a guy in a corridor. There's always something. I have run those numbers, Victoria, the same way you run yours. Then you understand why. No, Ethan said. Because I ran them again last week and I got a different answer. What answer? That I'm going to lose everybody eventually anyway, he said. And the only question that's ever actually on the table is how much of it I got first. The line was quiet. You are not the cost, Ethan said. You've been telling yourself you're the bill somebody else has to pay since you were 14 years old, and I'm telling you from the basement, from the guy who fixes the thing after it breaks. That's not what you are. You're the reason my kid had cake in an office. You're the reason 40 people stood in a lobby at 6:50 in the morning on a Monday in December. You want to talk about what you cost, you're going to have to talk about what you're worth in the same sentence, and you have never once done that. At 10:50 that night, headlights came up the driveway for the second time in 5 weeks. She did not stay in the car, and she did not knock. Ethan opened the door, and Victoria Hayes said, I'm not stopping, and Ethan said, I know. And that was the entire negotiation. On the 11th of February, at 4:30 in the afternoon, Victoria Hayes stood in the produce section of a grocery store on Ashland, with a child holding the cart, and a man standing 6 feet behind her, with his hands in his pockets, not saying anything at all. Which ones? Lily said. The ones that give a little, Victoria said. Not soft, just a little. How do you know that? My mother sold produce for 11 years. Lily looked up. Your mom had a store. My mother worked in somebody else's store, Victoria said, and she could put her thumb on a peach and tell you what day it would be ready. That was her whole trick. That was the thing she was proudest of in her life, and she was proud of it, right up until the end. And I was in high school before I understood that was worth being proud of. Lily put her thumb on a peach. "This one's Thursday," she announced. "Let me see." Victoria took it. "That's Wednesday." "Dad," she said, "Wednesday." Ethan did not answer, and Lily turned around, and Victoria turned around, and Ethan Carter was standing in the produce section of a grocery store on Ashland, with his eyes closed and his jaw locked, and both of them understood at exactly the same second, and neither of them said one word about it. Lily walked over and took his hand. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah, baby. We got 4 peaches." "That's good," Ethan said. "That's real good." And in the car with Lily in the back seat and a bag of peaches on the console, Victoria said quietly, "You didn't have to come in." And Ethan said, "I've been coming in since she was 5. And Victoria said, "You've been walking in. That's different from coming in." And Ethan had to sit in the parking lot for a minute before he could put the truck in reverse. On the 6th of March, at 11 at night, Ethan called her. "It's March." "I know what month it is." 4 years on the 9th. "I know," Victoria said. "It's on my calendar. It's been on my calendar since December. I put it on there the day after you told me, and I've been afraid of it for 3 months. "Why afraid?" "Because I don't know what I'm supposed to be that day," she said. "There isn't a role. I can't be sorry you hate being sorried at. I can't be absent, that's worse. And I can't be, I can't be the next one. There is no version of me that fits into the 9th of March. Ethan was quiet for a second. "Take Lily," he said. "What?" "On the 9th. Take her out. Anywhere. Take her to get a peach. Take her to a movie. I don't care. She spends that day watching me to see if I'm okay every year since she was 4 years old. 8 years old, and she spends the 9th of March doing a wellness check on her father." His voice went rough. "I want her to have one where she doesn't have to." "Ethan, that's what fits," he said. "That's the role. That's the whole thing." On the 9th of March, Victoria Hayes took Lily Carter to a museum on the lakefront, and then to a diner. And Ethan Carter drove out to a cemetery in Norwich by himself, and stood there for 40 minutes, and then he drove home, and then he did the thing. He took the green wool coat off the hanger. He did not throw it out. He folded it the way you fold something you are not throwing out, and he put it in a box with 3 other things, and he wrote on the lid in permanent marker, in the same handwriting that had been on a laminated sign behind a pipe for 4.5 years. And what he wrote was, "Lily when she's older," and he put it on the shelf in the top of the closet. Then he sat on the edge of his bed and cried for 10 minutes, which was about the same amount of time he had cried in a parking lot over a peach. At 6:40 that evening they came in loud. Lily first talking about a whale. "Dad, it's 4 feet. It's the whole ceiling. It's hanging on wires." "That's something." "And we had pie." "Both of you had pie." "She had 2, Lily said, betraying Victoria instantly and without remorse. Victoria stood in the doorway of the kitchen with her coat still on and looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan said, "I'm all right." And she said, "I can see that." And neither of them mentioned the closet, but she looked at it once on the way past, and the door was shut, and she knew what that meant. At 8:50, with Lily upstairs, Victoria sat down at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound like business." "Okay." Prentice brought the resolution to the March board meeting. Ethan set down the dish he was drying. "And it failed," Victoria said. 7-2. 7-2. "Do you want to know what happened?" She was almost smiling. "Ray Delacroix wrote a letter." "Ray wrote a what?" "A letter, to the board. 2 pages on lined paper in pen. It said he had been in that building 31 years and had watched executives come and go, and that in his opinion, the company had already made its decision about you in a lobby at 6:50 in the morning on the 22nd of December, in front of 40 witnesses, and that if the board wanted to reverse it now, it should be honest and say out loud that it was reversing it because of who you were seeing and not because of anything you had done. Victoria shook her head. And then he signed it, and 41 people signed it under him. Ethan put both hands on the counter. 41. 41, including Alvarez who walked you out, including 2 people from the 6th floor who I am told had said things in a corridor in January. They signed it anyway. They signed it first, Victoria said. Ray made them. At 9:15 that night, Ethan Carter went upstairs and sat down on the edge of his daughter's bed. Lil, you awake? Mostly. I want to ask you something and I want a real answer, not a nice one. Lily rolled over. About Victoria, she said. How do you always know? You have the line. She pointed at his forehead without opening her eyes all the way. The good one. Okay. Ethan took a breath. I need to know how you'd feel if she was around all the time. Not visiting. Around. Lily was quiet long enough that his heart started going. Can I say the thing I'm not supposed to say? Always. I don't remember Mom's voice, Lily said. I remember her hands, and I remember the song about the boat. But I don't remember her voice, and I used to think that meant I was a bad kid. Ethan could not speak. And I thought if somebody else came, that would be the end of trying to remember. She sat up. But she asked me about the peaches, Dad. She asked me which ones Mom used to get. She did. At the store. When you were doing your face by the apples. Lily lay back down. So she's not the end of remembering. She's more of it. Ethan Carter sat in the dark on the edge of a bed for a long time. Then he went downstairs where a woman was standing in his kitchen with her hand halfway to her mouth because she had heard every word of it through a heat vent that he had personally serviced in 2022, and he crossed the room and took her wrist and brought her hand back down. At 9:40 that night in a kitchen with a dish towel still over his shoulder. Ethan Carter said, the first completely reckless thing he had said in 4 years. Move in. Victoria Hayes stared at him. That's not a sentence you say holding a plate. I'm holding a plate. Ethan, I know it's fast. I know there's a memo and a firm on LaSalle, and a man named Prentice who says the words reputational exposure in his sleep. He set the plate down. But my daughter just told me you're not the end of remembering. And I have been standing in this kitchen for 4 years, being careful, and careful has not gotten me one single thing I wanted. Victoria put her hand on the back of a kitchen chair and held onto it. I own a condominium with a view of the lake and a doorman who calls me Ms. Hayes, she said. Okay. I'm saying yes. I'm just saying it slowly so I don't throw up. At 6:15 the next morning, Lily Carter came down the stairs, saw a woman sitting at her kitchen table with a coffee cup and yesterday's clothes, stopped on the 3rd step and said, Did you sleep here? On the couch, Victoria said. Your father is a gentleman, and it's very annoying. He does that, Lily said, and went to get a bowl. The problem started 6 days later. At 8:50 on the morning of the 16th of March, Denise put a call through that Victoria had been dreading for 2 years, and the man on the other end of it was named Wallace Quinn, and he was the chief executive of Cordova Systems, and he did not bother with any of the preliminaries. Victoria, I'm going to be a gentleman about this and call you before you read it. Read what? We're taking it to your shareholders directly. Tender offer. It goes out at 9. Victoria did not say anything. $31 a share, Quinn said. That's a 40% premium, and every institution on your cap table is going to take it. I like you. I've always liked you. I'd have kept you if you'd let me. You had a retention schedule with my name off it. I had a retention schedule with your name off it because you told me 4 times you'd never sell, and I believed you. A pause. That was Marcus's paper, not mine, and if you want to be angry about something, be angry about the right thing. He hung up. At 9:02, the offer hit the wire. At 9:11, the stock moved. At 9:40, Prentice called and did not say reputational exposure even once, which frightened Victoria more than anything else that morning. At 11. That day, she stood in front of the whole company again, all 410 of them, and told them the truth, because she had made a rule in December that she was not going to be a person who told them anything else. There is a tender offer for this company at $31 a share. If enough of our shareholders take it, Cordova owns us by the middle of May. I do not have the votes to stop it by myself. I own 19%. Somebody on the sales floor asked the only question that mattered. Ms. Hayes, do we keep our jobs? Some of you, Victoria said. Not all of you. And I am not going to stand up here and tell you a comfortable number because I do not know it. And the last executive who stood up here and gave you comfortable numbers is not with us anymore. At 1:15 that afternoon, Ethan found her sitting on the floor of the 22nd floor lobby with her back against the wall. He sat down 4 feet away, the way he always did. "Move closer, Carter." He moved closer. "I have 19%, she said. Employees hold about 6 through the option pool. Prentice's group has 22, and he'll take the money because that's his entire job. The institutions have the rest, and institutions do not have feelings." She rubbed her eyes. 47% of this company is going to say yes to that offer by Friday. "What do you need?" "I need 11% I don't have." "Who's got 11%? Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Marcus," she said. Ethan went very still. "When we did the Series B," she said, "he took equity instead of salary for 2 years because we didn't have cash. That was 2019. He believed in it then, Ethan. That's the part nobody puts in the story. He was a true believer with a mortgage, and he took paper instead of money, and he never once complained about it." She swallowed. "He holds 11.4%, and he has hated me since December, and he is going to take $31 a share and buy a boat. Then somebody should go ask him." "He won't take my call." "I didn't say you," Ethan said. At 4:20 that afternoon, Ethan Carter drove out to a suburb west of the city and knocked on a door that a man in a cardigan opened, and Marcus Hale looked at him for about 4 seconds and said, "You have got to be kidding me. 10 minutes. No. Then 5. Carter, do you understand that you are the reason I had to explain to my wife why a courier was at our house on the 22nd of December? "I do." "Then what in God's name are you doing on my porch?" "You said one thing in that boardroom I've thought about every day since," Ethan said. "You said the part you'd take back was having me walked out in front of 15 people. You didn't have to say that. Nobody in the room needed you to say that. You said it because it was true." Marcus Hale stood in his doorway. 10 minutes, he said. They sat in a den with the television off. "Quinn's offer is real," Hale said. "It's rich, it's cash, and it's clean. She can't beat it." "I'm not here to argue about the money." "Then what?" "There are 410 people in that building," Ethan said. "Ray Delacroix has 31 years in and 18 months to full pension. Tommy Reyes has a wife on dialysis, and he stays on our medical plan because it's the only one that covers the center on Roosevelt. Charlene in scheduling has been there since 2006. You know all of them, Mr. Hale. You knew them before I did. That's exactly why I did what I did." Hale's voice sharpened. "You still don't get it. I was trying to sell them at a number with a structure with jobs protected in the contract. What Quinn's doing now is the version with nothing in it for anybody. He doesn't have to negotiate with us. He's going straight over our heads because Victoria wouldn't take the meeting." "So you were right." "Yes. And it doesn't matter," Ethan said, "because you were right the wrong way, and now you're sitting in a den in a cardigan." Marcus Hale looked at his hands. "That's a hell of a thing to say to a man in his own house." "It's what my father would have said." "Your father sounds exhausting." "He was." Hale almost laughed. Then he didn't. "What does she want from me?" "She doesn't know I'm here." "Of course she doesn't." Hale shook his head. "Carter, I signed a separation agreement. I have a non-disparagement clause and a legal bill you would not believe. If I hold my shares, I lose about $4 million for the privilege of helping the woman who put a photograph of me on a table in front of 9 directors. "Yes, sir." "And you're going to tell me it's about legacy or some damn thing." "No," Ethan said. "I'm going to tell you what it's about, and then I'm going to leave. It's about the fact that in 2019, you took paper instead of a paycheck because you thought that building was going to be something. You were right about that, too." He stood up. "Everything since then has been you trying to be right about it in a way nobody could take away from you. And in the process, you handed it to a man in Cleveland who's going to put his own name on the lobby." He got to the door. "Carter." Ethan turned it around. "How's the plant running?" Hale said. "Compressor came in on the 4th of February. Unit 4's at 40% and quiet." Marcus Hale nodded slowly, like a man closing a file. I denied 11 of those, he said. 9, said Ethan. The other 2 never got signed at all. That's worse. Yes, sir, it is. At 9:50 the following morning, the 20th of March. Victoria Hayes was on the phone with an investment bank when Denise opened the door without knocking, which she had not done in 11 years. Ms. Hayes, Marcus Hale filed a 13D. Victoria put the phone down without ending the call. He what? There's a letter attached to it. It's public. It went out at 9:40. Victoria read it standing up. It was 1 page. It said that Marcus Hale, holder of 11.4% of the common stock of Hayes Technologies, intended to reject the Cordova tender offer and to retain his position, and that he was making this filing publicly and in advance so that other holders would know his intention before Friday. The last paragraph said this: that the filer had spent 4 years believing that protecting a company and protecting the people inside it were the same act, and that he had been wrong about that in a way that had cost a specific man his badge in a lobby in front of his coworkers, and that he did not expect the filing to correct it. Victoria sat down. Denise, get him on the phone. He won't take it, his counsel already said. Then get me his wife's number. Ms. Hayes, I'm not going to yell at her, Denise. I'm going to ask her to hand him the phone. At 11:40 that morning, Marcus Hale took the call for exactly 40 seconds. Marcus? Don't. I'm going to say one sentence. Say it fast. You took paper instead of money in 2019, and I never thanked you for it, not once, not in 6 years, and I have thought about that every day since December. There was a long silence on the line. That's more than one sentence, Hale said. It's one sentence with a lot of commas. You always did that. He cleared his throat. Victoria, I'm not coming back. I know. And I'm not doing this for you. I know that too. Good, said Marcus Hale, and hung up. At 2:15 on the 21st of March, the second thing happened, and it was Ray Delacroix's fault entirely. He walked into the 22nd floor with his hat in his hands, wearing a shirt with buttons which nobody in that building had ever seen. Ms. Hayes, I want to sell you my truck. Victoria blinked. You want to what? My truck, and my boat, which ain't much of a boat. And I got about $91,000 in a retirement account that my wife is going to kill me over. Delacroix. Ma'am, 6% of this company is in that option pool, and about half the guys don't even know they got any. Ray turned his hat over. Marcus Hale just said no in public. I read that filing 4 times on my phone in the parking lot. And I thought, well, hell, if he's holding and I ain't holding, what does that make me? Victoria stood up behind her desk. You cannot put your retirement into this. I already did, Ray said. I called the fella this morning. Took 11 minutes. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Denise did something Victoria did not ask her to do, and never once asked her to undo, which was that she typed 1 paragraph and sent it to 410 people, and the paragraph explained in words a person could actually understand what an option pool was, what a tender offer meant, what happened to a person's shares if they took it, and what happened if they didn't, and it ended with the sentence, nobody in this building will ever be told what to do with their own money, including by me. By Thursday morning, 361 employees had declined the offer. It was not enough. Everybody knew it was not enough. 6% held together is still 6%. At 9:10 on Friday morning, the 24th of March, the tender window closed. Victoria Hayes stood in her office with Ethan Carter standing by the window and Denise in the doorway and a phone on speaker on the desk, and the banker on the other end read the number out loud. Cordova had received tenders representing 46.1% of outstanding shares. They needed 50. Nobody in the room moved for a second. Then Denise made a sound like she had been holding her breath since Tuesday, and Ethan put his hand flat on the window frame and left it there, and Victoria Hayes sat down in her chair very slowly and put both hands over her face. At 9:15 the banker said, Ms. Hayes, are you still there? I'm here. Congratulations, that's a defense. That doesn't happen often. It didn't happen, Victoria said. It got done. By a maintenance crew and a man who hates me. At 2:40 that afternoon, Wallace Quinn called, and he was, to his credit, a good loser. 361 out of 410, he said. You know what my head of HR said when she saw that number? She said, I want to know what they're doing over there. Come find out. Is that an offer? It's a partnership conversation, Victoria said. Not a sale. Bring your architecture team, and we'll bring ours, and we'll see whether we're better at fighting each other or at fighting the people in Palo Alto who want us both dead. Quinn was quiet for a beat. You're going to be a problem for a long time, aren't you? He said. At 5:50 that evening, Ethan Carter came out of the freight elevator and found Ray Delacroix sitting on an overturned bucket in the shop with his phone in his hand and his eyes wet. Ray. Don't. Ray. $91,000, Ray said. And a truck I did not actually sell because she wouldn't let me. He wiped his face with his forearm. 31 years I've been in this building, boss. 31 years, and today's the first day anybody upstairs ever told me what my own shares were worth. The company changed after that, and it did not change the way it happens in a magazine profile. It changed in a series of extremely boring decisions that Victoria Hayes made one at a time and refused to make quietly. On the 3rd of April, she created a facilities capital line that could not be denied by any officer below the chief executive, and she named it over. Ethan's furious objection, the Carter line, and when he said it was humiliating, she said, It's supposed to be humiliating every time somebody says it out loud in a budget meeting, which is the entire point. On the 9th of April, she raised the floor wage in the building by $4 an hour and told the board it would cost $1.6 million a year, and that she was doing it anyway. On the 2nd of May, she killed the executive floor thermostat override and made every floor in the building run on the same system, and the 6th floor threw out 47 personal fans in one afternoon. On the 16th of May, she stood in front of a room of investors in New York, and a man in the 3rd row asked her in a voice pitched to Carrie whether she thought her personal situation had affected her judgment during the takeover defense. Yes, Victoria said. The room got quiet. For 11 years I ran this company as though the only thing that could save it was being smarter than everybody. Then in November, a maintenance supervisor stood in a 104-degree room and told me 11 true things I did not want to hear, and every single one of them was in a document my own executive had buried. She looked at the man in the 3rd row. My judgment changed. It got better. If you would like to short the stock over it, the ticker is on the screen behind me. She did not put her hand over her mouth once during the entire 90 minutes. At 10:20 on the night of the 3rd of June, Victoria Hayes got a text message from a telephone carrier, and she read it 3 times, and then she went and stood in the doorway of Ethan's kitchen and could not speak. What? She handed him the phone. The account associated with the number ending in 4471 has been flagged for inactivity. Service will be discontinued, and the number released on July 2, unless the account is updated. That's the $11 a month, Ethan said. That's my mother's phone number. Okay. They're going to give it to somebody else. Her voice was thin. In 4 weeks, that number is going to belong to a stranger in Peoria, and every single message I have ever written to her is going to go to a man who sells insurance. Then keep paying it. That's not the part I'm afraid of. Ethan waited. I have 209 unsent drafts in that thread, Victoria said. 3 years. I have written her about the Series C and about the day I fired somebody for the first time. And about you, and I have never sent one, because the day I send one is the day I find out there's nobody there. She sat down. And now there's a date on it. Ethan sat down across from her. Can I say something that's going to sound stupid? You always can. Call it. Call what? The number, Ethan said. You said it goes to a recording. I have never once called it. 3 years. 3 years. Victoria. He put his hand flat on the table between them. In 4 weeks, that recording gets erased whether you hear it or not. Those are the only 2 options on the table, and one of them you get to choose. She looked at that hand on the table for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and called her mother's telephone number at 10:35 at night on the 3rd of June and put it on speaker so she would not be alone with it. It rang 4 times. And then a woman's voice said, You've reached Margaret. I'm probably at the store. Leave it after the beep and speak up, I can't hear a thing." Victoria Hayes made a sound that Ethan Carter had never heard a human being make. He got up and came around the table, and she stood up into him and held onto the back of his shirt with both fists, and she cried the way people cry maybe twice in a life, and the recording waited, and the beep came, and neither of them noticed it. At 11:50, with her face swollen and a glass of water she had not touched in front of her, Victoria said, "I forgot it. Ethan, I forgot what she sounded like. 6 months ago I couldn't have told you. And I have been writing her letters for 3 years like a person who remembers. Now you do. Now I do. Do you want to send one?" She looked at him. "Which one?" she said. "You know which one." At 11:58 on the 3rd of June. Victoria Hayes scrolled back 3 years and 7 months in a message thread to a draft she had typed with her thumbs under a coat in a dark lobby at 2:40 in the morning, while a man talked about his father and a steel plant in Gary. And she looked at it for about 10 seconds, and then she pressed send. It went to a recording. It did not go anywhere at all. "There," she said. "How is it?" "Terrible." She wiped her face. "Wonderful. I don't know. Both." She kept paying the $11 a month. She still pays it. At 6:40 on the evening of the 14th of September, Ethan Carter did something he had planned for 5 weeks and executed badly, which was that he asked an 8-year-old for permission and then failed to keep it a secret for 90 minutes. "Lil, I know. You don't know. Dad, you have had the good line on your face since Tuesday, and you keep opening the drawer where you keep the tape measure, and there's no tape measure in that drawer anymore." Ethan closed his eyes. "I moved the ring." "To the coffee can." "How do you know about the coffee can?" "Because you're not a spy," Lily said. "You're a maintenance guy." The wedding, when it happened, was in a courthouse on a Tuesday in October with 14 people in the room, because Victoria Hayes had said the phrase, "I am not walking down an aisle with 300 people watching me walk," exactly once, and Ethan had said, "Then we won't." And that was the entire conversation about it. Ray Delacroix stood up with him and cried harder than anyone. Denise brought a cake she made herself and got very defensive about the frosting. Lily Carter, 9 years old, carried nothing and had no job and stood beside Victoria the entire time anyway. And when the judge got to the part about a lawful union, Lily said out loud to the room, "This is the good part." And the judge had to stop for a second. On the 14th of November, 1 year to the night, from the failure that started all of it, they went back. The building was dark on 22, because Victoria had put the lights on motion sensors in April and saved $11,000 a year, and they came up through the freight elevator, because she had not used the executive one in 11 months. She had 2 vending machine sandwiches. "You're not serious," Ethan said. "I bought these from the machine on 1940 minutes ago, and I would like it noted that I paid full price." They sat down on the floor with their backs against the wall, 4 feet from where a woman had once fallen asleep against a man's shoulder for 2 hours and 20 minutes. "Turkey," she said. "Allegedly. There's a word on the wrapper." "That's as far as anybody's willing to commit," Ethan said, and she laughed full volume, both hands in her lap, and it echoed off the glass and came back at them. They ate. It was still terrible. "Can I tell you what I actually thought that night?" Victoria said. "Not the message. Before the message." "Yeah. You handed me a flashlight and told me to hold it steady over Delacroix's shoulder, and you said it like I was a person who could hold a flashlight." She turned the sandwich over. "That's it. That's the whole thing. Nobody had handed me anything in about 6 years. People hand me decisions. Nobody hands me an object. I needed both hands." "I know you did. That's why it worked." Ethan looked at the ceiling for a second. "You know what my biggest mistake was?" Victoria said. "Falling asleep on a man and leaving my phone face up on the floor. 32 years of being careful, and I was undone by a cracked screen. That wasn't a mistake. It was a catastrophe. I woke up and told you it didn't happen. You did. And you said, 'Yes, ma'am.' I did." "Why did you say 'yes, ma'am'?" "Because you were scared," Ethan said, "and I wasn't going to make you pay for it at 5:20 in the morning." Victoria set the sandwich down. "Say the thing," she said. "You've never said it out loud. You've said everything else. You've said it to Prentice. You've said it to a room of investors. You said it to a man in a cardigan in a den. You've never said it to me on this floor." Ethan Carter thought about it for a moment. "You spent your whole life trying to prove you were worth loving," he said. "The company, the hours, the 19 straight hours in a 104-degree room. All of it was evidence. You were building a case, Victoria, the same way I build a paper trail, because we're both the kind of people who think somebody's going to ask us to prove it someday." "Yes, I never asked for the proof." He looked at her. "The best thing that ever happened to either of us is that you got tired enough to stop holding it up. That's all it took. You fell asleep, and I got to see you, and there was never 1 minute after that where I needed anything else." Victoria Hayes did not put her hand over her mouth. She sat on the floor of a dark lobby in a building she built with her back against the wall and let a man look straight at her, and she did not flinch, and she did not deflect, and she did not make it into a joke. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay." She leaned over and put her head on his shoulder on purpose, this time wide awake. "How long did your arm stay dead that night?" "About an hour after you left." "You never told me that." "There was a lot I never told you." "Not anymore," Victoria said. "They stayed there until 11, and then they went home where a 9-year-old was asleep with a light on and a box on a closet shelf with Lily when she's older written on the lid in permanent marker, and a phone number in Chicago that costs $11 a month rang through to a woman who had been proud of knowing when a peach was ready. Ethan Carter had spent 4 years believing that opening his heart meant standing in a hallway waiting for a doctor. Victoria Hayes had spent 32 years believing that no amount of proof would ever be enough. They were both wrong, and it took 1 broken machine, 11 denied requisitions, a laminated sign behind a pipe, and 2 terrible turkey sandwiches to prove it. A person is never worth what the room says they are worth. The one who sees you is the one who notices the part you are working hardest to hide, and does not look away, and does not ask you to be smaller, and hands you a flashlight because he needs both hands. Victoria Hayes stopped covering her mouth. She never covered it again.